We recently met a Catholic scientist who is very familiar with explaining how her love of physics and astronomy blend seamlessly into her faith. Reporter Mark Irons spoke to Dr. Evelyn Tang, who teaches physics and astronomy at Houston's Rice University, about her faith journey in depth.
Tell me a little about your story, your background, your heritage, your upbringing, and sort of your own journey of faith. And then you can tie in also how you developed sort of a love for science and your fields along the way.
So I grew up in Malaysia, and my dad is an engineer who I think I got a love of science and math from him, just seeing him, and he had an incredible seriousness about, working out his equations. He was a structural engineer, making sure that the building would stay up. And so just a seriousness with which he did calculations, and I would just look at him. And so when I went into high school, I was already interested in math and physics, and I really actually loved physics. And I did grow up as a Catholic in Malaysia, which is, it's a Muslim country, so we were definitely a religious minority. But that was also an interesting experience of, having to explain what you're doing to other people or what this faith is. But definitely when I grew up in high school and started to get attracted by lots of other things, that was when I, started to have a lot of questions and stopped going to church. And how I came back was very interesting because I was running cross country and my coach was Hindu. And that's because this was in Singapore then, very, very multiracial, multi-ethnic place. And he said to the team, go and read stories of the saints because they have great mental determination.
The story of the saints.
Yeah.
He's Hindu.
He's Hindu. When you're running long distances, your mental needs to be really, really clear. And he was, and I went home and I asked my dad, do we have any stories of the saints? And he gave me Saint Teresa of Lisieux, Story of a Soul, and I read it and I just started crying, and it just sort of tore my angsty teenage world apart. Like this was so much love that was going beyond all the usual categories of who loves me not. What am I supposed to do with myself? And so I started going back to church at that time. And then I started to also think about what's the meaning and significance of things, of my life, of what do I do. And so then I had to think, well, what do I actually really enjoy? Well, of course, that's why I studied physics. It is beautiful. There's a harmony to it. I think Poincaré has a beautiful quote where he says, it's a beauty and harmony of how things fit together, but that's not off the senses. It's more something they see, mentally, that things are harmonious, but it's a very satisfying, very beautiful.
Physics is beautiful.
Yes.
Sometimes there's an idea that maybe science is just cold, hard facts, but to say it's beautiful, that's...
Yeah, it's saying like, well, what are these universal laws that underpin things, that tell you how things go, and that shows you logic and structure and connections between things that you didn't see before. So and understanding that under the underlying web of how things relate to each other, that is beautiful, that there is that structure, that order beneath what the apparent reality of things.
On this topic of faith and science, I think sometimes, maybe you've seen it, people think they're mutually exclusive. What's your thought on all this as a Christian, as a Catholic, as a scientist?
I do think that there's many, attitudes, underlying attitudes that I would say, an honest believer and an honest scientist would share. One is wonder at just saying like, wow, like this world, creation itself, it's so incredible, it's so intricate.
Both the scientist and the person of faith have that kind of wonder.
Yes, yeah. Yes. If you look at flowers, if you look at nature, but if you look at people and how everyone is so different, like all these marvels of nature around us, and also that we have the seasons, we have space. I mean, there's so many things that are just amazing and beautiful when you look at it. When you look at the skies and you look at the stars, there's so many things that are just like, wow. So I would say that fundamental attitude of wonder, and also attention. I think habits of interiority that are helped through prayer, but also as a scientist being able to reflect and think deeply and to really think carefully through things, learning to pay attention and focus on your particular domain, on your particular question. I think these are also things that are, very central to both the believer and the scientist. There is a sense of mystery that as a scientist, in the end, you have to say that, look, I know these certain facts, but there's so much more that I don't know and that I can't prove.
And you found that in your own work and your own research as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the same thing as a believer. There is so much we don't know. How did this come to be? Why am I the way that I am? Why do I like this and why do I like that? I don't get to choose these things.
Do you have faith reflections? In your research, in your study, do you think about God through this work?
I think the theme that has gone through my work, because then later on I did switch to biological physics, is the idea of really emergence, which is that when you get lots of parts that come together, but you get a behavior that's more than the sum of the parts. You know, I can't just say like, well, I have a bunch of cells, let me just put them all together and voila, a person happens. If that could happen, we could build a person in the lab by putting together all of the cells of a person, but we can't. And because it's not just as simple as putting together the underlying ingredients.
There's something unique about being human.
That's when the sense of wonder happens, like, wow, you know, who made this?